we've obviously been working together now for, I think, around about 5 years. It's a long time. And obviously a lot has changed, not just in terms of what we've been doing together, but in terms of the market generally, technology. There's been a lot of change. I'm just really curious to get an opinion from you really on specifically how the Network Sunday proposition has evolved over those 5 years. And perhaps you could share some of the insights from a client's perspective, particularly as we sort of move into the most recent proposition now, which is around the thought leadership approach.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the reason I've always enjoyed working with Network Sundays, to me, you've tried to stay one step ahead of the traditional approach. So when we first met, the innovation at the time was using LinkedIn as a medium to reach out to prospects, whereas up until that point, for me, LinkedIn was more a peer-to-peer communication platform and wasn't really being looked at from a lead generation point of view. So that was interesting and innovative of itself. And then, as you say, I can't believe it's 5 years that we've been working together. But over the time, we've introduced various different techniques to build on that platform, culminating in where we are at the moment, which is the thought leadership engagement. But I fully anticipate that in 2020 we'll be doing something different to that even, but it's this continuous improvement effect that I think's been the hallmark of the relationship, and it's why we've stayed working together over that period.
If we sort of stick on this thought leadership concept then, so what do you think is kind of the reason why we're getting quite a good response from the market with this strategy?
I think first thing in its favour is we're not selling anything to the people we're approaching. We're actually inviting them to participate in something that we think's interesting, and also we think they've got a part to play in developing that interest for other people. And for me, I think that does appeal to the mindset of the kinds of people that we're trying to do business with, because they themselves are agents of change, trying to push the agenda for their own organisations, and they seem to be stereotyping that population. They seem to be very keen to give their thoughts and opinions back into the industry as well. So I think it's struck a chord there that we're possibly a refreshing change to those people who are overtly selling something. And you and I have had conversations that says if we don't do a deal on the back of every contact, that's okay, because we are getting something valuable out of it, just in terms of the insights that our prospects and contacts are giving us. But I also think they're getting something out of it as well. So for a relatively small investment of time, there's a very good return on the time they spend with us.
Definitely. And so sort of when it comes to meeting these professionals who've participated in some of the thought leadership initiatives, which of course cover the interviews for ebook, online panel discussions, the roundtables, etc. Can you describe, is the feeling different in the meeting because they've been through this experience first? How can you describe perhaps how the context might be slightly different to perhaps historically, where it might just be a 4 or 5 line email and a quick call?
If you think about the temperature gauge from cold to very warm in terms of prospects and your relationship with them, and by the time we get to a face-to-face meeting and they've been through the initial survey, they've perhaps participated in a video panel, contributed to the ebook, it's like they're part of the family already, and there's an affiliation there that is completely unheard of before when we were doing traditional lead generation work. Mm-hmm. I think the fact that we're producing quality materials as well really heightens their sense of confidence in us as an organisation. And one of the things that has struck me is it feels much more like a peer-to-peer relationship than a customer-supplier relationship, and there's that affinity with each other. So when we're in the room, it's about solving problems. It's not about a traditional sell and supply kind of relationship. But I think the credibility we're getting from it, I definitely think it's enabling us to punch above our weight in terms of being a thought leader now in the technology space. and people are wanting to be part of it. And so I think the issue we're going to have to contend with is oversubscription at some point fairly soon. So nice problem.
A nice problem to have, as you say. Yes, and just this whole kind of, if you like, switch from the context of an interview into more of a sort of sales dialogue. Yeah, what are your thoughts on that? And just to sort of elaborate a little bit. When these professionals are going into the Tech Pros interviews, obviously, we make it clear to them at the interview that there could be follow-on conversations that could evolve with the sponsor, in this case, of course, Triad. Do you think that the level of transparency is sufficient? Do you think that they are put off at all by the fact that potentially they could receive a sales call, or do you think that that's almost an irrelevant point, really?
I think it's actually an important point that there is transparency behind the process. As we were refining the process in the early stages, we were having to deal with an element of surprise, if you like, that people were being followed up. And it wasn't our intention to surprise them or to ambush them, but I think between our organisations, we recognised the need to increase the transparency. I think from our point of view, it's a two-way street, because the thought leadership interviews, give us a huge amount of insight into the prospect's situation. We've had to adopt the discipline that sometimes we'll say, well, there's not a problem we can help with there, so don't go chasing it. That there is not a sales opportunity, and we say to ourselves, that's okay. But flip side of that is, if we do see something that's relevant, we use the fact that it came up in the interview and the discussion to highlight the relevance, and we make it a very focused next step with the prospects, which again I think they appreciate, because it demonstrates that we've listened, and it demonstrates that we're thinking about that particular problem in their terms, rather than trying to flog them a solution that we haven't yet diagnosed the need for from a client perspective.
Great. And Adrian, sort of last question really. So if you were to kind of provide a bit of advice to an organisation that was looking at, I must add that I think we're on to the 5th thought leadership program now at Triad. So you've got the most experience as a client, from a client's perspective, than any other organisation we've worked with. So I guess you're probably in quite a good position to make a comment. What advice would you give to an organisation, technology services organisation that would be looking to embark on a program?
I think the main thing we've learned is you do have to be somewhat selfless in terms of nominating a theme. If it's not of interest and of relevance to the wider marketplace, you're not going to get engagement. So we've been quite careful in terms of how we've brainstormed the themes and road tested them, not just with yourselves, but internally, to say, would this be of interest to people? Would they be prepared to contribute? And would we be creating some value there? And I think it helps because we've got a fairly broad service proposition ourselves. We've got some latitude there. But if one of your clients, for example, was highly product based, then I think they'd need to translate how that product operates in the marketplace in client need terms, rather than necessarily pushing the solution and its features across to them. So I think it's getting the topic right. I mean, what I would say though is, again, following our agile principles, is don't be afraid to fail fast. So I think one of the things that's worked well is we've tracked the pickup rates on these themes with you guys, and if we've needed to change the messaging or the theme itself, we've been responsive to that. So I'd far rather we have shorter campaigns and measure them than long ones and find out at the very end that they haven't worked. So